My body wouldn't move. The child's foot took another step into the room, and a strong smell of damp earth filled the air, as if something was rotting right there in front of me. My heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo through the entire room. And then, finally, I saw it. The figure stepped out of the shadow. It was a girl, or at least something that had once been a girl. The white dress was dirty, stained with something dark and dry. The thin arms hung limply at her sides, but it was a face that made me want to scream. The skin was translucent, like old paper, and the eyes were wrong. Black, deep, empty, a void where life should have been. But the worst was the smile. That too wide smile that didn't seem to belong to a human. I don't know how I found the strength to move, but somehow I did. I jumped out of bed and bolted to the door, trying to pass through it without looking back. But at the last second, something made me turn. The girl was still there, standing in the middle of the room. Her face was tilted to the side, watching me as if analyzing every detail of me. And then her lips moved. There was no sound, but I understood perfectly what she said. "You've seen me. Now I can find you." You never really leave that house. I ran out of the room, racing down the stairs, as if something invisible was about to grab me by the heels. The air in the house felt heavier, as if every wall was alive, pulsing to the rhythm of my own rapid breathing. I no longer cared about the judgmental looks from the staff or the few visitors still wandering the halls. I just wanted to get out, fast. Stepping through the front door should have been a relief. The humid night air enveloped me, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe without that crushing weight on my chest. But something was wrong. The plantation around the house seemed different. The trees, which had seemed to bend with the wind, were motionless. The sky, which should have been dark, seemed deeper than normal, like an endless void. Then I saw my reflection in the mansion's window, and I understood. My image in the glass didn't follow me. I was standing outside, but my reflection was still inside the house, watching me from the other side of the door. It smiled, not in a friendly way, not in a human way. It was the same smile I had seen in the cracked mirror, the same smile that girl had shown me before whispering those words. My feet faltered, and absolute terror took over my body. I had left the house, but something told me that, somehow, I would never truly leave. The air grew heavy. My father leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. The money was necessary. We needed to take care of some things. It was obvious there was more to it. But what? Debts? Problems they never told me about? Or something even worse? My heart raced. The truth was there within my reach. And even without wanting to, I knew that what was coming could change everything. This wasn't just about the apartment anymore. I was about to discover what had truly motivated this betrayal. My father's answer left a bitter taste in my mouth. We needed to take care of some things wasn't justification. It was a diversion. Something was being hidden from me. I took a deep breath, trying to stay in control. I wanted to explode, to scream, to ask how they could have the nerve. But I forced myself to be strategic. Take care of what? I asked, keeping my tone firm. This time, my mother lowered her head, and my father looked away. The silence was a confirmation I needed. The hole was deeper than I had imagined. It was my mother who broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Your father made a bad investment." My blood ran cold. Of course there was something like that involved. My father had always had this habit of wanting to multiply money quickly, betting on things he didn't fully understand. "How much?" I asked, feeling my anger grow. He hesitated, but then said, "All our money and more than we had." My stomach churned. This wasn't just about covering a debt. It was about survival. They hadn't sold my apartment out of greed. They were desperate. Suddenly, everything made sense. The nervousness, the fear in their eyes. They hadn't deceived me because they wanted to. They did it because they saw no other way. Did that make it less painful? No, the betrayal still burned, but now there was a different weight to it. Now, anger shared space with something I didn't want to feel, compassion. But that didn't mean I was going to let it slide. I could understand their desperation, but nothing justified what they did to me. It was my turn to decide what to do with the truth I had just uncovered. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. My apartment had been sold to cover a debt I didn't even know existed. All that talk about "we did it for your own good" was a poorly disguised lie. The real problem was that my father had gambled too much and lost everything. I took a deep breath, trying to process it. I could have helped. We could have found a way out together. But instead, they chose to betray me. And now, after everything, they were there, expecting me to just accept it? You had other options, I said, my voice more controlled than I expected. You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth. My mother wiped her eyes, and my father clenched his fists on the table. You wouldn't have understood, he said. But I did understand. I understood all too well. His pride hadn't allowed him to admit his mistake before it was too late. So, they did the unthinkable. They went behind my back. And now they were dealing with the consequences. But I wasn't going to fix this for them. If they wanted to sink, they could sink alone. I got up from the chair, grabbing my keys from my pocket. You've lost my trust, and that's worth more than any money. My father didn't try to stop me, but my mother held my hand for a moment. Son, but she couldn't finish. I just shook my head. There was nothing left to say. If they thought they could play with my life without consequences, they were about to find out otherwise, and I already knew exactly how. I left that cafe feeling a mix of fury and coldness. I could have just cut ties and moved on with my life. But that wouldn't be enough. They needed to understand the gravity of what they had done. More than that, they needed to feel what it was like to lose something important. But I wouldn't act impulsively. If they were cold enough to sell my apartment without remorse, I needed to be even more calculated. They taught me the cruelest lesson in life. Sometimes, the worst blow comes from the person you least expect. Now, I would use that same lesson against them. My first move was simple. I stopped helping them financially. They didn't know it. But I had always discreetly contributed to some of their expenses, a small amount here and there to cover bills they pretended didn't exist. I cut it all off. Within days, the difference was felt. The messages started coming. First timid, then more desperate. My mother asked to talk. My father, proud, remained silent. I read them, but didn't reply. I wanted them to know what it felt like to be ignored when you needed someone the most. But I wasn't going to stop there. If they had used legal tricks to sell my apartment, I would use the same against them. I contacted a lawyer and started a process to recover part of the sale's value. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. My name had been used illegally, and now they would have to explain themselves in court. Their silence quickly turned into desperate attempts to talk. But now, I was the one in control. Days passed, and slowly, their desperation began to show. My mother tried calling me every day, sent long messages, trying to justify the unjustifiable. My father, on the other hand, remained silent, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of fear of what was coming. But one thing was certain. They were finally feeling the weight of the consequences. My lawyer was clear. There were enough legal loopholes to contest the sale of the apartment. And if I wanted, I could even formally accuse them of fraud. But what I really wanted wasn't just legal justice. I wanted them to understand what they had done to me. So I played my final card. I arranged another meeting, but this time in a controlled environment. My lawyer's office. If they wanted to talk, now it would be official. When they arrived and saw the papers on the table, their faces turned pale. My mother was trembling slightly, and my father, for the first time, seemed truly remorseful. We didn't want it to come to this, my mother whispered. But it did, I replied. They needed to see that they couldn't just erase the consequences of the wrong choices they had made. The lawyer explained the options. I could nullify the sale, which would leave them in an even worse financial situation. Or I could accept a settlement, fair compensation for what they had taken from me, and a guarantee that they would never try to manipulate my life like this again. My father, defeated, just nodded. They knew they had no way out. And in that moment, I realized I had already won. I didn't need to take revenge anymore. What I wanted more than anything was the truth, and now I had it in my hands. The room fell silent for a few moments. My parents were facing an ultimatum. For the first time, they weren't in control of the situation, and it scared them. My lawyer waited patiently, the documents ready to be signed. My mother held her trembling hands in her lap, and my father took a deep breath, staring at the paper in front of him. "We never meant to hurt you," he said, finally breaking the silence. But it was too late for empty regrets. I watched as he signed the agreement. They agreed to return part of the sales money, an amount I knew would weigh on them but wouldn't completely ruin them. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted to make sure they would never cross me again. When my mother signed, tears streamed down her face. "Will you still talk to us?" she asked. Her voice choked. I swallowed. Hard. I didn't have that answer. Something inside me had changed forever. Trusting them the way I used to was impossible. When I left the office, I felt a relief I hadn't expected. I had achieved justice without stooping to their level. I didn't need to take revenge. I just made them face the consequences of their own actions. I still felt the pain of the betrayal, but now I knew they would never have the power to hurt me like that again. I was in control of my own destiny. The apartment? It was gone. But my dignity, my independence, and my voice, those I had reclaimed.